Let's ball. Let's go.
Get ready for Beyond the Arc, the show that eats, sleeps, and breathes the hardwood. Featuring two guys who know how to move on the court.
You got a defender in your way. You take him to the left. You take him back to the right. And he's falling back, and you just Jay right in his face. And then you look at him. And then you say what?
A couple of basketball junkies who shine the spotlight on everyone in the world of hoops.
I got game, she got game, we got game, they got game, he got game.
It's the coach, Bryan Fulford.
My entire adult life, I've never used the expression game face.
And the scout, Steve Barnhart from HardwoodHoopsCentral.com.
That boy is good.
Gentlemen, the court is yours.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Arc, live from the 740 The Game studios and the iHeartRadio network. My name is Bryan Fulford, and I'm solo in the studio, but joining us from an undisclosed location, my man Steve Barnhart from HardwoodHoopsCentral.com. Steve, we won't ask you to divulge the secret location of where you're calling us, but wherever you are, hope you got there safely. How you doing, my friend?
I'm underground, Brian, so I'm not at liberty to be able to give my exact location at this point, but hopefully you can hear me.
I understand. You're doing what scouts do this time of the year as we're getting ready to get back into the school year. So I understand. You're doing your job, man. That's why we love you. We want you to interact with us in the plethora of ways that we have tried to make ourselves as interactive as possible. On Twitter at BTA Hoops, on Facebook, Beyond the Arc Podcast. What else do we have, Steve?
I'll make it very easy for everybody.
Please do.
The easiest way to find out where to find us on social media and find us where our shows are, our podcasts, the easiest thing to do is go to HardwoodHoopsCentral.com and click on the page that will say Beyond the Arc Radio Show. Click on that page. It'll give you everything. It'll let you know who our sponsor is, all that good stuff. So check us out there. All the links you'll need to go directly to our podcast page, our show pages where our old radio show episodes, they'll all be on there. So check us out there, HardwoodHoopsCentral.com, Beyond the Arc Radio Show. All that information will be there for you.
Wonderful. Well, this is what we call our back to school edition, where Steve and I guarantee that 90% of the show will not be talking about anything related to the NBA.
There you go.
So we've got plenty to talk about. We've got we've got college hoops to talk about. We've also got joining us later in the show, ESPN National Recruiting Director Paul Biancardi, a friend of the show, will be joining us later. But I figure, hey, there's no better time than let's go ahead and get started with our opening tip.
The ball is
Steve, come on. You know you love that. You love that. We did a little something. How you like that, Steve? The little intro for the segment.
I like the last part with the Bulls, but you know how I feel about one shining moment.
I want anyone and everyone out there, send Steve a tweet at HW Hoops Central. Tell Steve how great one shining moment is, and it is the epitome of songs to wrap up the college. Steve is like the only college basketball fan I know that doesn't like one shining moment.
I am the humbug Grinch when it comes to that song.
Oh, man, you disappoint me every time we get in that. All right, let's get into this, Steve. Let's just start right off the bat because there's a couple of different things that have been released recently in relation to college hoops. We're starting to get information on tournaments and schedules, and we're going to start right off with ESPN releasing their college hoops tip-off marathon. And so for those of you who have been living in the dark for the last 8 seasons, what this is essentially this is 24 hours of basketball. Literally. So this is the 8th year that ESPN has put this thing together. It'll begin on Monday, November 16th, which essentially is about the first full weekend for regular season basketball games, I think, that can start playing, if I'm not mistaken. It's either the first or second. And it concludes on Tuesday, November 17th. And literally, there are games that start 5:30 in after the whole lineup consists of games running from 5:30 all the way into midnight. And yes, literally, there are games at 11:30, 1 in the morning, 4 in the morning, because you got to figure, which 1 o'clock on the East Coast, but what time is it on the West?
Well, like the 4 o'clock game, for example, Nevada at Hawaii. Hawaii is 6 hours behind if you live on the East Coast. So technically, where you're at 4 a.m., but they're 6 hours behind, so you're looking at it being 10 a.m. Hawaii time. So it works out.
Right. So, just going through a few of the notes just to kind of let people know, well, who's going to be in this thing? Well, you've got 10 teams that'll be participating in this that are in ESPN's. Now, really, this is a preseason ranking. So literally before the actual preseason rankings, there was like a preseason pre-ranking. And so they've got 10 teams off that list playing in this tournament. They've also got number 22 LSU playing in what they call a Legends Classic, featuring a Kennesaw State team. You've got teams on the West Coast, such as San Diego State hosting Utah. Of course,
Utah's hosting San Diego State.
My mistake. Utah's hosting San Diego State, correct. You've got a matchup between Baylor and Oregon. Baylor's ranked 17th according to ESPN's list. BYU, Long Beach State. And then, of course, it just all winds up towards, or sort of spins its way towards the final couple of games, which is what they call the State Farm's Champions Classic. Uh-huh. And that has become sort of the first, it's almost a blue blood tournament, right, featuring Kentucky, Duke, Kansas, and Michigan State. And what they do, they've just been rotating. Every 3 years you're playing somebody new. And it just so happens that 3 of the teams that played, of course, last year in it ended up being in the Final Four. And this year you've got Kentucky ranked 3, Duke ranked 6th, Kansas ranked 5th, and Michigan State ranked 19th. Usually it seems like Michigan State is always the team that comes in ranked lowest, but at the end of the season you end up seeing them play well. Any other matchups throughout this tournament? And there's a whole list of them, but what matchups are you kind of excited to see actually played?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. Georgetown, a storied rivalry between Georgetown at Maryland gets rekindled at 9 o'clock, and it gets shoved between the classic games, the Kentucky and the Kansas game. Right. They just kind of get shoved in there. But I think a lot of people don't understand that these two schools are 10 miles apart. Right. The two programs have refused to play each other the last 3 decades, basically harking back to essentially a beef between Lefty Driesell and John Thompson Jr. that was never resolved. And so you'll be able to get that. Georgetown is bringing back Devontae Smith-Rivera. And some good young talent. They'll most likely be a top 25 ranked team at some point. They have a chance to be a contender in the Big East. And they're playing Maryland, who's coming in as one of the 3 possible teams that could be preseason number 1. So, I look at it and I say to myself, that's a matchup a lot of people are automatically going to look over because of the fact that while that game's going on, you're going to have this second half of the Kentucky-Duke game, which all eyeballs will be on. And I would say, other than that, I'd say there's a sneaky good matchup between Valparaiso at Rhode Island
at 10 in the morning
on Tuesday the 17th. Right. That's a game that I like.
Right. And, this is why they created the ESPN Watch app, because if you can get it at work, this is a perfect opportunity to just put that app on your phone or your tablet to the side somewhere and just watch hoops while you're working. Treat it like it's what you might normally do during the NCAA tournament in March. So this is a good event. And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. Kicks off the very first game is a women's game between the 3-time national champion UConn Huskies and Ohio State. So wouldn't want to miss that. Moving through another schedule, which was released maybe about 2 or 3 weeks before we finally got the matchups for the Maui Invitational. Mm-hmm. And the Maui Invitational, usually held the week going into Thanksgiving. It's almost like the granddaddy of the Thanksgiving holiday tournaments, which by the way, that's a great period of time to watch college basketball. Of course, there's going to be some college football on, but it's just, you're sitting home, you're taking time off from work. There's always some late games, and the Maui never disappoints. And this year's field for the Maui, it's really some historic programs. Another group of blue bloods, which, let's be honest, not all of them have had the greatest success over the past few years, but they're still recognized names. You've got Indiana from out of the Big Ten, Kansas from the Big 12, St. John's from the Big East, UCLA from the Pac-12, UNLV, and then also UNLV's from the Mountain West. You've got Vanderbilt from the SEC and Wake Forest from the ACC. And, of course, the local host is Chaminade, the Chaminade Silver Swords. And they always seem to give somebody a headache in the first game, but really, they're sort of there as the local host. What are your thoughts about that field? As you hear the teams and you think about that field and some of the historic teams and players that have come out of those programs?
Well, I mean, the interesting matchups right off the bat. I mean, in one side of the bracket, you have a possibility of Indiana playing Kansas at some point. I should say, well, let me see. No, I'm sorry. Kansas and a UCLA matchup. And then, you've got the championship game that could happen between a team like Indiana and Kansas. Not any slight to UCLA, but obviously if UCLA wins, that's another interesting matchup as well. St. John's has, a first-year head coach coming in named Chris Mullins. We'll be able to see what he's able to do with that program as a former alum/player.
Right.
UCLA, they lose Kevin Looney and Norman Powell to the NBA, but they add an explosive leaper in Prince Ali, Aaron Holiday at guard. They have returnees in Thomas Welch and Tony Parker, Isaac Hamilton. But for me, I think that an interesting lineup I'll be kind of, for me anyways, I'm interested in seeing would be UNLV. They lose Christian Wood and Rashad Vaughn, but they add Derek Jones and the Canadian talent and Jalen Poser and a five-star center in Steven Zimmerman. Dwayne Morgan didn't quite have the freshman year that a lot of people thought he might, and he's able to return as a sophomore. And they've got a couple of transfers and things of that nature. So they're an interesting lineup at UNLV, and I'll be interested to see. They were 18-15 last year, but I'll be interested to see what they can do with the incoming talent that they have and some of the returners and transfers that they have.
I love the way they've set up the opening games and just the storylines that might happen. I mean, here's St. John's, as you already mentioned, coached by Chris Mullins, a former, a player who took them to, I believe, 2 Final Four appearances, the only 2 in program history, playing Vanderbilt. Then you've got Wake Forest, coached by Danny Manning, playing Indiana. Danny Manning, of course,
right,
led Kansas. Kansas is in the field playing Chaminade. And then, speaking of Indiana, you've got a former Indiana great in Steve Alford, who's coaching UCLA, playing against UNLV. It'd be one of those matchups where if you had a Final Four, consisting of a St. John's versus an Indiana, Kansas versus UCLA, I could see someone like Dick Vitale losing what little bit of hair that's left. I mean, he would go nuts because you've got blue bloods in college basketball, and you get some kind of revisionist story about 1985 and Bobby Knight and Louis Carnesecca and John Wooden and So I mean, it'd be a wonderful matchup. I don't know if it'll end up that way, but it's one of those opportunities to really soak in. And there'll be more as we get closer to the Thanksgiving break. There'll be more time for us to kind of talk about the other holiday tournaments, because I know the Maui is one of the major ones, and there will be some others. And then there was one other schedule that came out: the annual conference v. conference matchups between the ACC and the Big Ten, known as the ACC Big Ten Challenge. If I'm looking at the numbers here, this is the 17th year of this event. The ACC leads this series 10-4-2. Now, on the surface, you look at that and say, whoa, now Steve knows I'm a Big Ten guy, grew up in Big Ten country. And the ACC, they won the first 10 of these things outright. Right. But the last, 6 years, the Big Ten let's see, they won the next 3 after losing those 10, and the last 2 have been tied. So essentially, the Big Ten is 4-0-2 over the last 6 years. So going into the 17th year, we've got some interesting matchups. Let's at the back end of this, I think are some pretty interesting games. Actually, it starts Monday, November 30th. Goes through December 2nd. So it's a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, a 3-day thing. But let's jump to Wednesday, because I think Wednesday you've got Louisville at Michigan State. Rick Pitino versus Tom Izzo.
Well, let's back up for just a second. You're missing a potential 1 versus 2 matchup on Tuesday.
Oh, you see a 1 versus 2. Okay.
Maryland at North Carolina, which that to me is the flagship game of this tournament. But I'm definitely interested in seeing Duke and Indiana. They should be probably the top 5 offensive programs in the country. That's going to be an explosive matchup in terms of points scored. It'll be interesting to see with what Louisville lost last year, how they kind of bounce back, and then of course Michigan State always gives everybody a tough game. Of course you get Pitino, coaching against Tom Izzo, so that's always going to be an interesting matchup. And of course you've got Notre Dame playing against an Illinois team that should be able to bounce back. Wisconsin will be interested to see what after the major losses that they've had,
right,
how they'll fare against Syracuse. So Syracuse, they always seem to be able to do some positive things in this tournament. So there's some definitely interesting matchups on Wednesday, but the flagship game for me anyway is Maryland at North Carolina.
That's interesting. That's interesting. My personal belief, I think the schedule on Wednesday, yes, on Tuesday. And you can always look at this because the games will be featured on ESPN and ESPN2, and a couple of the games will be on the U. So you can always look at the schedule and kind of see what ESPN is spotlighting. Of course, on Tuesday, their ESPN game is Virginia at Ohio State. Virginia will be, or they are right now, a preseason top 10, maybe even a top 5 team. And then, of course, you pointed out the Maryland at Carolina game is the 9:30 ESPN game. Right. And then on Wednesday, the ESPN game is Louisville at Michigan State, followed up by Indiana at Duke. And I'll be honest, I can't remember the last time Indiana actually went to Duke. I'm looking for a way to get the camera indoor for that game. I don't know how, but I'm looking for tickets.
It involves sleeping in a tent outside of a basketball gym.
I'm down.
And some warm clothes.
I'm down. I'm down. Anyone knows some Dukies out there? Let me know, because I am willing to come out to Shesheskyville. And guess what? I will be back for the show on that Thursday, ready to report live about my night, rather. Guaranteed. All right, we're about to hit the break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Elite 24 with ESPN National Recruiting Director Paul Biancardi. You're listening to Beyond the Arc on the iHeartRadio Network.
Welcome back to the show that eats, sleeps, and breathes the hardwood. Beyond the Arc. Presented by TNT Elite Hoops.
What are you doing? I'm doing 2 things. What? I'm making them mad. Most guys don't play good when they're mad.
Basketball. You're embarrassing me. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing I'm doing.
I only have 4 words for you.
White men can't jump.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc, live in the 740 The Game studios in Orlando, Florida, and the iHeartRadio Network. My name is Brian Fulford, joined by my man Steve Barnhart from an undisclosed location.
Mystery still unresolved.
Quickly, we want to tell you about, before we get into our conversation with Paul Biancardi, just tell you very briefly about iSlide. If you're looking to show off your individuality and show everyone what you stand for, let iSlide do the talking for you. iSlide is a premium custom athletic slide company that offers one-of-a-kind, comfortable slides that allow you to put your image or artwork on the slide. You can even design a customized slide featuring your favorite NBA team. Visit iSlideUSA.com now to check out all of the variations and design styles that you can create from your own laptop or PC. That's iSlideUSA.com. And for our listeners of Beyond the Arc, use the promo code BTA15 and receive 15% off your order. Again, use promo code BTA15 on iSlideUSA.com and stand in what you stand for with iSlide. All right. Now, ready to join us is a friend of the program, the ESPN National Recruiting Director for Boys High School Basketball, Coach Paul Biancardi. We call him Coach. It's Coach Paul Biancardi. Coach, how you doing, sir? Thank you for joining us on our radio show.
Brian, thank you for having me. Stephen, thank you for inviting me.
Not a problem, Coach. Anytime.
Well, this upcoming weekend, just for our listeners here, it's the 10th annual Elite 24. It'll be broadcast on ESPNU, featuring 16 seniors ranked in the ESPN 100, 7 juniors in the ESPN 60. The two-night outdoor event begins tomorrow with the slam dunk contest at 7 p.m., and then it concludes with the showcase game at 7 p.m. And, of course, our friend Coach Biancardi is calling it with Mike Cousins and, of course, the great Jay Williams. Coach, right off the bat, as we think about this Elite 24, you know, these kind of events usually are perfectly made for guards, and there are some exceptional guards that are on this roster. Guys like Troy Brown, Kobe Simmons, Frank Jackson. What are some of the guard matchups that are most interesting or appealing that our audience should be looking out for?
Well, Brian, there's so much talent in this game, as you alluded to. There's 16 ranked seniors in the game. And now instead of 7 ranked juniors, there's 8, because Michael Porter is now here. And he's the number 2 player in the ESPN 60 in the class of 217. So that gives us the number 1 player in the junior class, DeAndre Ayton, the big man, and then Michael Porter at number 2. But it is a guards game, and it always will be a guards game, especially when it comes to all-star games. I look at the matchup of Trayvon Duval, one of the number 1 point guard in the junior class, and he'll go against, it could be Kobe Simmons, who's a top 10 player in the senior class out of Georgia, big athletic guard. And I think that would be a great matchup because Kobe Simmons is long and athletic, fast, he's quick, and he's got great length. You know, can he handle Trayvon Duval and keep him out of the lane in a one-on-one matchup? I think that's going to be the key to the guards. Can they keep each other out of the lane? Because you got guys that can really beat people off the bounce, like Raleigh Alkins, right here from New York City. I mean, he gets to the rim as well as anyone in the country. And Markelle Fultz, 6'4", scoring guard out of DeMatha Catholic. A great middle game, again, great at attacking the rim. I think we're going to see a lot of guys attacking the rim, playing above the rim. And because we're outdoors, I don't know if we're going to have a lot of three-point shots.
All right. Steve?
Coach, looking at the Elite 24, and of course now Nike's doing their, I guess you'd call it their inaugural event on the Bahamas. You're calling it the Elite EYBL Select roster. What matchups would you say basketball fans are missing because Nike has their event, and of course that's separate from Elite 24?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was your question, Stephen? What matchups in that game?
Oh, I was saying because of Nike's event. What matchups would you say that basketball fans are missing because some of those guys from the Nike event are not going to be Elite 24?
Oh, what's missing? Well, I mean, it's number 1 player in the country, Harry Giles, against anybody, because I don't know who can really stop him on a one-on-one scenario. We got some great big guys in this game, though. Bam Adebayo has had as good a summer as any big guy in the country. And Udoka Azubuike, the big, strong, physical guy from your neck of the woods in Jacksonville, Florida. So, Wenyan Gabriel is a forward I'd like to see Giles go against. So those would have been some great matchups. And then you think of Jason Tatum, the number 2 player in the nation. Love to see him go against Josh Jackson. That's a small forward matchup made in heaven, those two guys. And So there's some matchups missing, but there are some tremendous matchups in this game. Brian, you talked about a guard's game, and it is. But when you look at the bigs in this game, I look at a lot of these bigs and I say to myself, who's not going to be in the NBA someday? Right. I mean, you have Thon Maker, who was the number one player in the nation with us until he went to Canada. We just don't rank kids when they leave the country. And DeAndre Ayton, the number one junior in the nation, on the same team. I mean, those are twin towers with skill that it's hard to find anywhere. You got to tune in to see those two guys, if anything else.
Speaking of Thon Maker that you mentioned, of course we've seen the video of his skill set from the perimeter where he essentially put a crossover on a guy, another skilled big man, mind you. So we know he can handle the ball from the perimeter. What is it about Thon Maker's game? Is there any comparison to anybody because we know over the next year and a half, we're going to hear about Thon Maker versus a Harry Giles potentially being the number one draft pick in 27. What is it about Thon Maker or who might he compare to that really impresses?
Well, first of all, he has unique size and skill. I mean, you don't find guys that are a true 7-footer who can put it on the floor and get to the basket effectively and change their direction with the dribble. He makes jump shots comfortably out to 15 to 17 feet. And then you put him inside, though he's not strong, but he is quick up to the rim. A lot of comparisons have been out there. Jonathan Bender, long, lanky, a little bit of a shot blocker, good scorer. People think Kevin Garnett now. He doesn't have the ferociousness of Kevin Garnett, but he does have that frame and that skill level of Garnett. Again, long, 7-footer with skills. He plays hard, and I think that's what makes him so special. You got size, skill, and really, Thon Maker, when you watch him in a game, he'll run up and down the floor. He'll try to rebound. He'll try to defend. He plays the game to win, and he doesn't shortcut anything, and I think that really makes him special.
Coach, since we're talking about point guards running this game, for example, in a recent ESPN Recruiting Nation article written by a couple of your own guys, Adam Finkelstein and Joel Francisco, they talked about the role of the point guard position evolving from being pass first to being more of a scoring guard role. How would you say the crop of point guards in the 2016 class, or maybe even more specifically, even in this game, are redefining the position?
Stephen, that's an excellent question. I've debated that myself, and I've reached out to some college coaches and even some NBA personnel. The feedback that I get back is that, the game's not changing. The point guard position is not changing. There's just not enough true point guards in the game. And so you see the Russell Westbrooks, even Steph Curry. Now, Steph Curry's a little different because the Golden State system wants their point guard, per se, to score the ball. They want 5 guys playing small ball, looking to score at all times to create mismatch problems. But your traditional point guard, say the Milwaukee Bucks, they have Jason Kidd. He wants that pass first, think about the team first point guard. And I don't think there's just enough pure, natural point guards who think about their teammates first and getting guys shots. Today's day and age, a lot of kids think about themselves, and then they call themselves a scoring point guard. But to be a point guard, you have to think the game, why you play the game. And I'd like to see some more guys, become better at the game from an IQ standpoint and passing. I think Alonzo Ball out from West, he's the best passer in the game by far. And then you look at a guy like Frank Jackson, who's in this game from Utah, really can shoot it. But Frank Jackson has the IQ and the passing ability and the mindset to be a point guard down the road. And I think that's what's important. You have to have the mindset to be a point guard.
Joining us on the line is ESPN National Recruiting Director Paul Biancardi, Coach Paul Biancardi. And, Coach, okay, so we're starting to get to that point of seeing more schools out of the SEC other than Kentucky recruiting 5-star athletes. Of course, most recently, we've seen Mustafa Heron a 5-star guy signed with Auburn. And then there's Terrence Ferguson, who's in this Elite 24, signed with Alabama. And to me, just the fact that Auburn and Alabama have 2 5-star recruits is mind-blowing. What are your thoughts on, as you look at these guys and talk to these guys, and then you think about some of the coaches that are now in the SEC? Could we possibly see a change in that? Coaches like Bruce Pearl, Avery Johnson, Ben Howling, that they're actually going to, what are they saying to get kids to commit to these SEC football schools?
Well, you're exactly right. They got 2 5-star guys, Auburn and Alabama, and they weren't linemen. These guys are elite players in our class. And Mustafa Heron, high motor guy, strong wing, love his ability to produce. He's going to be terrific at Auburn. And then you talk about Terrence Ferguson. I mean, he's a deep 3-point shooter and an excellent defender. But the reason being is the coaches. You hire Ben Howland, you got Malik Newman, the top 5 player in the country. That might not have happened without a coaching change. Bruce Pearl comes in last year. He gets 2 ESPN top 100 players, Daniel Purifoy and Horace Spencer. And now he's getting Heron. So you have coaching changes, and these guys can really recruit. Michael White of Florida, he's going to get talent. He was a high major assistant at Mississippi and head coach at Louisiana Tech. He's going to do an outstanding job. And then who gets more top 10 players in the country than John Calipari at Kentucky? LSU had a blockbuster class last year with the number 1 player in the nation,
right?
Ben Simmons. The SEC this year coming up is going to be loaded with young talent. And as you hit it, they're doing it again. And these coaches that are there right now, outstanding. And don't forget Texas A&M. They're like the stepchild of this league. They moved to the SEC, and they just done an outstanding job. They have Robert Williams committed, a top 50 player in the senior class from Louisiana, long and athletic. They just had a monster class last year, A&M. So SEC basketball, back strong.
Well,
yeah, I like a lot of the things that Texas A&M has added, especially with the last class, and that you're definitely right. But with all the talent in Texas, they'll have a lot of guys to pick from going forward. But Coach, another guy that also committed here recently. So basically, the SEC has had, for those counting or those at home, they've had 3 5-star commits from the 2016 class commit in the last 4 days. We already mentioned Mustafa Heron going to Auburn, and we had Terrence Ferguson go to Bama. But a guy that you broke the news on, which was yesterday, Sasha Kalia-Jones going to Kentucky. Of these 3 guys, Heron, Ferguson, Kalia-Jones, which of these guys do you think will have the most or the biggest immediate impact for their team when they arrive on campus?
I think Mustafa Heron. He's physically ready. He's emotionally ready. His game is so strong. It's productive across the board. He rebounds. He beats you off the drive. If you leave him alone, he's a very capable 3-point shooter. So I think he'll be very productive for Bruce Pearl early when he gets there. And then Terrence Ferguson will be very good at Alabama. His body is still very thin right now, but extremely athletic. He is going to be in the dunk contest tomorrow night and the 3-point contest at the Elite 24 on ESPNU at 7 o'clock. But I would say Heron first, Ferguson second, and Sasha Jones only third because he has the greatest upside of all 3. If he can ever stay for multiple years, he'll be an impact guy at Kentucky eventually. We're talking 6'10", plays inside out, soft touch, great hands. He just needs to get stronger.
All right, Coach, before we let you out of here, we know after this Elite 24, the next big event is you and your team have to get together in a room, lock yourselves in, and come up with the ESPN 100. If I recall, that's how you guys do it, right? That's what you guys do?
Yeah, I don't know if we lock ourselves in or kind of put our phones on mute so, nobody can reach us. Because you can't take calls during this time because we are on a lot of conference calls and, hashing out a lot of players, evaluating them against like players, their size and skill. So, we've kind of narrowed it down going into this weekend, and then we'll reconvene on Monday But our new ESPN rankings are coming out Wednesday for the senior class. They're coming out Thursday for the junior class. And then Friday, we'll have our 25, which is the sophomore class. So it's a big week for high school basketball rankings next week at ESPN.
Yes, it is indeed. Well, once again, we want to remind you all to catch Coach Biancardi, Paul Biancardi, and the ESPN U broadcast, the Elite 24. It'll be tomorrow night, beginning with the dunk contest at 7 p.m. Saturday night is the actual game. It's outdoor. It's a beautiful scene. If you've never seen it, you've been missing out the last 9 years, because plenty of guys who have gone on from this event are now playing in college major programs, and even, if I'm not mistaken, something like 55 guys who are in the NBA used to play in this contest. I think that's the number. Either 84, I think it's 84 current guys over the 9 years. I think I'm just rereading. So make sure to check that out. Coach, thank you for your time. We appreciate you, and we look forward to the broadcast this weekend and then the ESPN 100 when it's released.
Basketball performance training.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Stephen, for having me. You guys do a great job.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right.
Appreciate it.
Coming up after the break, Steve and we've got some questions to answer, and we're going to be doing that here as we get ready to go into the fourth quarter. You're listening to Beyond the Arc on the iHeart Radio Network.
Nowadays, everybody want to talk like they got something to say. But
Welcome back to the show featuring two hoops junkies who need to work on their free throws. Beyond the Arc, presented by TNT Elite Hoops. Visit TNTEliteHoops.com to make your hoops game better today.
Buddy, get the ball to Jimmy. Top the key. Let's get this spread the floor. Let's go.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc, presented by TNT Elite Hoops on the iHeart Radio Network. My name is Brian Fulford, joined by somewhere on a I don't know, a sat phone or a pay phone. It might be Steve Barnhart from HardwoodHoopCentral.com. It was definitely a little bit choppy there, Steve, on that last segment. But
yeah, I switched from calling in on my phone, and then we set it up to call in from using Skype, and Skype doesn't seem to particularly like the connection.
All right. See, Mike and I thought you had ran down to the corner store or something and a bad payphone or something.
No, I'm in my hotel room.
All right. Hey, before we get into our three good questions, I promised that we would only talk 10% NBA. And so I want to bring up the one quick nugget before we get into our questions. And I have to give some applause or some props to, as you and I have called him, the greatest player of our time right now, and it's LeBron James. And it's not for anything LeBron is doing on the court. It's strictly for what he is doing off the court. And you may have heard the story. You may have seen the press release, or it's gotten a little bit of coverage over the last week. But through his foundation, the LeBron James Foundation, LeBron James has set up in his hometown of Akron, Ohio, he has made possible 4-year scholarships at the University of Akron to students, some 2,000 underprivileged kids in his community, so that if they adhere to the tenets of his program, which I'm kind of, to paraphrase, the tenets are essentially, making a certain grade, going to class, staying out of trouble, staying away from drugs and alcohol, things like that. His, as he calls it, his I Promise network. And I apologize for not having it all, but essentially him making available, or him using his resources to connect with the University of Akron and making 2,000 kids, giving them an opportunity to go to scholarship, is way beyond anything that I think any modern player in our time has done, and I applaud him for it. And hopefully more NBA players will use their wealth and make a change in their home communities like this guy has.
By the way, that's a $38,000 value for each one of those kids.
Amazing.
Isn't that amazing? Times 2,000 kids?
Wow.
Yeah, strictly, really is.
All right, so that was my 10% basketball. All right, Mike's got 3 good questions for us. The show is yours, sir.
All right, well, now, which guys will you be interested in watching at the Elite 24 this weekend?
Steve, I'll let you go first.
All right, since I'm calling him from the bat phone, I'll make it real quick. I'm interested in seeing DeAndre Ayton. We're looking at Team Easy. I'm looking at, I think it's Easy Pass, actually. I don't know what they're calling it. But anyway.
I have one of those.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to DeAndre Ayton. He suffered a fractured kneecap back in February. I'm interested to kind of see what he's able to do on a big stage to show he's bouncing back from that. The other guy I'm looking forward to seeing on that team is Josh Jackson, the number 3 overall rated player in the 2016 class. Earlier in the month, he was at the Big Strict Classic, which is another New York-based all-star game. Just before the game, he called that he would score 50 points in that game, and he did just that. So it'd be interesting to see what a scorer and a versatile player like him would be able to do in the open floor type of game. On the other team, Team Doobie Doo, I don't even know how they come up with this.
You can't say it with a straight face.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm looking forward to seeing Raleigh Atkins. He's one of these guys that's had a really good spring and summer campaign, probably as good as anybody you can name. He's playing at home. It is a guard game, as Coach alluded to. And then another guy, if I had to pay attention to a 2017, a guy who's probably not getting as much press as some of these other guys, Billy Preston from Prime U out of Dallas. Excellent offensive rebounder who can score it in bunches, basically operates below the three-point line. This is a game where rebounds, will be pretty much, you'll be able to have your way with the offensive rebounds. He's a guy that can play strong above the rim and gets after it in the offensive glass. So I'd be interested to see what he can do.
You must have purposely left off my man, 7th Woods. First off, the name alone, 7th Woods.
No, I figured I'd let you have it.
I mean, the YouTube sensation of the stuff he was doing as a freshman and sophomore, ridiculous, crazy athleticism. I just want to see this kid play. I've been paying attention, looking for him. I just want to see if the hype is still legitimate because I'm looking forward to seeing this guy go big time pretty soon, especially with that name. Next question.
All right, is it time to change the definition of point guard?
That's a great question. No. I'm a traditionalist, but I think what we ask our point guard to do may need to change. But I still like to have the point guard title, and because that's your leader on the floor. Somebody has to be the quarterback. Somebody has to be the point guard. Somebody has to be the the goalie. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You need those those positions.
Personally, I think instead of just calling it a point guard, I think we need to expand it out to instead of PG as a point guard, I think we need to look at it and say playmaking guard. Because, you think about, the high school and college players now are and they've always done this. They've always emulated the players in the NBA. And if you think of guys like John Wall and Chris Paul, they're not just guys who can score at a high level. They can, get a lot of assists at a high level, but they're also long and compete on the defensive end, can start the break. Chris Paul is more of a passer on the break, and John Wall's, more of a finish at the rim kind of guy on the break. But these guys are all around, no matter what facet of the game you talk about, they're able to make a play. And there's a lot of guys up and coming that are eventually going to evolve into that as they go into the college and the NBA levels. And I just think we need to kind of widen out and stop having such rigid definitions and saying that guys are pass first or scoring guards. Just open it up a little bit. Don't make it so rigid, and let's just be mindful of the fact that the game is constantly evolving.
Last question here. We only got a minute, Steve, so you got to be shorter on your answer on this last one.
All right, here we go. Could a 5-star Kentucky recruit, Jamal Murray, lose his eligibility for playing for the Canadian national team?
You got 30 seconds, Steve. Fire away.
Go, Steve.
No, he should be able to play. Classes are going to start on August 26th. The national team is going to play into the middle of September. Let the guy play. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Don't take it away from him. What do guys? How much do guys really learn in a semester of college anyway? Don't take the opportunity away from him.
Wow, as a former educator, Steve, I have to take offense to that. But anyway, I'm going to say, here's the story for people who don't know. The fact that Kentucky starts class on the 26th. The camp for Team Canada Canada starts sometime just after that. And the question of him missing camp or missing classes is what's at issue. If this were the United States and a kid in the United States, they would find a way to make it they'd find a way to make time for this guy to get there. So let him play. Let him play. That's going to wrap it up for us in this episode of Beyond the Arc, our radio show version. On Twitter, at BTA Hoops, Facebook, Beyond the Arc Podcast. Check us out to Facebook, all over place. Steve, I can't even recall where we're at. Anyway,
like I said, hardwoodhoopcentral.com.
Thank you.
Beyond the Arc Radio Show. All the links